So MotoGP has one tyre supplier now. Ai Ogura is no longer a surprise, and in the end, Marc Marquez wins. Welcome back to MotoGP. Motorsport 101 would have also been an acceptable answer. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 567 of Motorsport 101. I am your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison, and glad you could join us as ever. Sorry this one's a little bit later than planned. We had to, because of the Spencer Hall dates we got with him on the Wednesday, we prioritized putting the F1 season preview out first. Plus, also, I have been battling a quite nasty chest infection for the last few days. I didn't have it in me to really go 3 hours straight to record everything that I wanted to record in one sitting. So forgive me for that. Luckily, I'm about 90% well again, so I'm pretty much there. So been a hard week, but thank you for all the kind words and people telling me to get well soon. I do really appreciate that. But it's time to talk about bikes. Our bikes. The bikes are back.
In the middle of our bikes. Our bikes.
Indeed. And yes, the MotoGP season opener this week at the Chang International Circuit in Buriram, Thailand. Brand new track for the opener. New opener because Qatar is celebrating Ramadan right now. Ramadan Mubarak to all those out there from the Muslim community. Hope you're having a pleasant and peaceful month out there. Hope you're able to break your fasts and all of that. And our love goes to all of you. So Qatar will be in April. So instead, we got Thailand, one of our fan favorite rounds as an opener. And while we didn't necessarily get a classic, we did get some confirmation. Oh no, it was real. It was all real.
I tried to tell you. We tried to tell you. Y'all didn't want to listen.
I tried playing this down, but oh boy. Guys, it was worse than we expected.
Dre's right. We confirmed it. Honda are mid now.
Hey!
Which for them is a win.
Indeed. So joining me to make sense of all of the last week in Thailand and change. First up, Mr. Cameron Buckley. Hello, sir.
Personally, this has been an incredibly validating opening round of MotoGP. I am not going to stop talking about it. I am not going to log off, and I am not going to improve.
Entirely reasonable. Also joining us is Mr. RJ O'Connell. Hello, RJ. How's it going?
It's going okay. I just say, after the race, I think the only person that might have been as happy as y'all is brother Ryan, because Alex Marquez finished second. This was like a collective victory.
Yeah, like having stayed up to an absolutely unholy hour to watch this race, because it is literally on the other side of the globe from where I live.
An unholy hour.
It was like 3 a.m. Eastern, wasn't it? Something silly like that?
Well, you see, I only have 2 modes, and that is sleep for a week or sleep is for the week. In this instance, sleep was for the week. It might have been the most peaceful, happy Discord call in the history of our Discord server, because we're all just like, hey, look at us. Look at us. Who would have thought? Not me.
Brother Ryan has never been so happy to have his man finish a Grand Prix in second, because it was like, guys, the Marquez brothers are 1 and 2. First time a pair of brothers have ever finished 1 and 2 in a Premier MotoGP class race in the modern era. And Alex Marquez coming home in second. We'll talk about a little bit about that as well. But safe to say, a good week to be a Marquez brother. Not so great if you're Pecco Bagnaia. But we'll cover all of that and a whole lot more. It's been a very busy week of coverage for MotoGP on the season opener. And we'll talk all about the ins, outs, and in-betweens later. Also, forgive me for a little bit of self-indulgence here, just a smidge. But I think it's only fair that I tell you, thank you to everyone who sent in their kind words in regards to the fact that I now actually run 2 MotoGP podcasts rather than 1. For those who don't know, who missed the news last week, the Motorsport Network and the powers that be have decided to give me my own show. I'm the host of the new Tank Slappers podcast over there for the Motorsport Network. alongside Ben Hunt and Uriel Puigdemont. Puigdemont's one of the very best in the biking business out there. Does tremendous work for the Motorsport Network, has done for a long time. So it's a privilege that I'm able to sit down and pod with him for half an hour every week. So it'll be me, Ben. I'm sure many of you know Ben Hunt from Autosport and, of course, The Sun. Very, really cut his teeth over there as a journalist. Sometimes you got to separate complication and the man. But yes, Ben and Yuri and me will be on Tank Slappers every Tuesday on the Motorsport Network. Do check that out and subscribe. And thank you for all the kind words in regards to that. My LinkedIn page looks like a Christmas tree, which was kind of weird to say, but here we are. I'm now 32. I'm talking about LinkedIn, for fuck's sake. But thank you all for all the kind words. If you somehow want to listen to even more of me talk about bikes, you can over there. Places you can find us real quick. We are on youtube.com/Motorsport101, where you could also listen to the full episode of Spencer Hall's podcast in full, if you want the full 45-minute interview in video form of him talking about how he became a motorsport fan, his favorites, other series he watches, and some 2025 preseason predictions. That is all on our YouTube page in full. We are a visual medium again, occasionally, and thanks to the power of the side, I'm actually going to start putting out some shorts and highlights from our episodes on there.
To appeal to the youths?
To appeal to the youths and the TikTokers. Watch this space, is what I will say in regards to that. So do stay tuned. YouTube.com/Motorsport101, Facebook.com/Motorsport101, Twitter, Motorsport_101. And if you want to follow us on Blue Sky, you can personally at dreharrison.bsky.social, RJ O'Connell for his, and cbuckley917 for Cameron's. And if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/Motorsport101, the early access for all backers at $5 or more. And you can back us at the $10 level to listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, as Ghost Raptor is doing right now. Thanks for your support, big man, as ever. And of course, motorsport1.com, our website where all those details are posted and a bunch more. RJ put a brilliant Super Formula guide out the other day. Do read it. I know we've had the first weekend by now, but who cares? It's still good shit. Go and read it.
That's right. I might even follow that up with a race review. Although, again, much like the prospect of the race preview, the season preview itself being a game time decision, this is also going to be a game time decision because 48 hours after we record this, I'm going to be in Orlando, Florida, or driving to Sebring, whichever comes first. Sebring 12 hours this coming week.
Indeed. Check that out already. And of course, by the time this goes out, you'll have full Haters Guide series previews for Formula One, MotoGP, and IndyCar. The Formula One version got done as I recorded this tonight. So do check that out if you haven't already. It's nearly 6,000 words reviewing everything in regards to F1 in 2025. Again, big thanks to everyone that's read and passed that along. Do really, it's one of my favorite things to do in the preseason is just put everything in the neat little package for you to enjoy going into the season, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did writing it. Right, enough previewing from me. Let's get into our MotoGP review of the Thai Grand Prix.
Well, that was a statement of intent. It was a perfect debut weekend in factory red for Marc Marquez, who qualified in pole, led every lap of the sprint race, and then played with his brother Alex en route to winning the Thai Grand Prix, his first win of 2025. Alex Marquez was second, as mentioned, the first pair of brothers to finish 1-2 in the premier class of Grand Prix motorcycle racing. And teammate Francesco Bagnaia was third. Dre, we did it. Look at us. Look at what we've accomplished together.
You know, I've beat this drum before, but it's worth repeating that for a good while we weren't sure if we were ever going to see this form of Marc Marquez again. You know, from all the injuries, all the struggles, his loyalty to Honda, and every trick in the book he was trying to get Honda back up to speed. And then, the last year's Ducati was a shot in the arm, but it wasn't quite there because the GP23 package wasn't quite on the level of the incredible 24. This was terrifying. This was prime Marquez back. He's playing with his food, Marquez. Like, this was everything you could have asked for and more. Like, it was awe-inspiring to watch in real time. We've missed this version of Marc. We've not seen this version of Marc in 5 years.
We've not seen this version of Marc Marquez since the first race of the pandemic-affected 2020 season at Jerez, when he was leading by a mile and a stretch, and then he puts a wheel on the paint at just the wrong time, and it impacts the next 5 seasons of MotoGP racing.
It is going to go down in history as one of the biggest flashpoints in MotoGP history. Because that injury, as you said, RJ, it affected the next half decade of how we looked at this sport. It gave birth to a bunch of new stars, a new era of technology that Marquez passed by, and just him trying to figure out where he was in the pecking order again. And we found out, no, do not get it twisted. This man has been him all along. And that was dominant. Do not let the timing screen fool you. This was, the more you read into this race, the more you realize Marc probably won this Grand Prix at 50%. Cam, hit him with it.
We tested his DNA. It broke the him scale. He won this race with one hand on the handlebars and the other checking his phone. He was looking for places to eat after. This was a joke. What else is there to really follow it up with? Like, he and his brother dominate every practice session. Alex Marquez looking superb on last year's, basically Austria spec GP24. And then he goes to qualifying, and Marc puts it on pole, and then he dominates the sprint, leading every lap.
Yeah, every lap this weekend was led by a Marquez brother.
Yeah. A brotherly grand slam, if not an individual one. The funniest part of this was listening to Paddock Pass after the race and them going like, no, we talked to people in Ducati. This was supposed to be a Bagnaia track. Pecco Bagnaia got curb stomped this weekend.
Yeah, it was a 2.4 second margin over the line, but that is pretty deceptive because there was a clear gap between Marc and Francesco. And I asked a question when we did our season preview. It's just like, so what is Francesco Bagnaia at this stage? Chopped liver, and that's not an encouraging start.
As an opening salvo, that has got to be terrifying.
It's worst case.
In that camp.
It's worst case scenario. Pecco Bagnaia, Pecco's right. We just had a Thai Grand Prix 4 months ago. This really wasn't that long ago, and Pecco dominated that race from start to finish. Yes, it was in the wet, but basically the pace he was running forced Marquez into making a mistake to try and pass and stay with him. Bagnaia won that race comfortably in the end. Jorge Martin was the only person in the same postcode, and he decided that it was not worth it to go for 25 points. He took the 20 and went home. That was 4 months ago. And Bagnaia was dominated in Thailand on previous occasions. He's very, very fast around here. This was worst case scenario. Bagnaia was comprehensively outclassed the entire weekend. Bagnaia's a qualifying ace. Didn't qualify on pole, was beaten by someone on last year's bike and Marc himself, was beaten in the sprint. And as RJ alluded to, that 2.3 second gap over the line was essentially the last 3 laps. Because...
Well, let's get to that. Marquez gets the whole shot and disappears up the road. And then suddenly, he's not leading anymore. He's had to back off completely out of turn 5, and he lets Alex Marquez in front of him. We're wondering, oh no, is the dream weekend being ended by a mechanical? Well, not really. What it actually was was Marc getting a tire pressure warning on his dashboard. When you do that, you drop in behind someone. Well, he had no one to drop in behind but letting his brother by and then following him around for most of the race.
That slipstream warning only comes up when your tire pressure is dangerously low. Now, for those who may need a quick reminder, the rule is in MotoGP that you have to have ran 60% of the race distance or more with your tire pressure above a certain threshold. These bikes have sensors. They are able to detect and they warn the rider on the dashboard now if the tire pressure is too low. For what it's worth, to give you a quick yard scale or sense of context, if you're not a huge bike fan, because I know some people listen to this show and they're not even bike fans, so I think it's only fair I try and make it a bit more
This is crazy.
and easier to understand language for you. Let's put it to you this way. A lot of MotoGP riders these days are starting races on tire pressures that would fail an MOT below 14 psi. What we would consider as a normal human being flat. So, and the only way to get that tire pressure up is by running in the dirty air behind, the turbulent air behind another rider. If you run it on your own, your pressures go down, they stay low, and if you do that for more than 40% of the laps, you will be hit in the Grand Prix with a 16-second time penalty, which would essentially drop you off at least the podium, probably down to minor points at best, given how modern GP is these days. It's a significant penalty. I don't care what you tell me. It's a bad fucking look for MotoGP that the dominant race winner of this weekend had to spend 2/3 of the race playing with Alex Marquez behind him and following him around at risk of his tire pressure being too low to compete competitively. It's silly. I don't care what you tell me. Like we all shit ourselves thinking there was a mechanical, and it was Marc deliberately letting his brother through so he could follow him. If you had to explain to a non-MotoGP fan, they'd call you ridiculous.
Yeah. I had to slow down from the lead and go into second and follow someone around for 60% of the race, or I would have been effectively disqualified. Because that's what this penalty originally was going to be until they realized, we're going to see a bunch of bikes disqualified each race if we're not careful with this, and that's going to bring the sport into disrepute.
Ultimately, we did get the result we wanted out of it, but it was just like, it was a very weird way to get here that really doesn't reflect how things should have gone.
Well, the last 3 laps did, because Marc then passed Alex and fucked right off in about half a lap. He was pulling, he set the all-time lap record here in the race. He was playing with his food, and when he finally decided to eat, there was no one in the same racetrack as him.
Yeah, when Bagnaia came out with a very Valentino Rossi-esque kind of phrase after that race was over, when he turned around and said, well, Marc put 2.3 seconds on us in 3 laps. I think he was playing with me a little bit out there. Which, well, it's hard to argue that when you're going 0.8 faster than one of the quickest riders we've ever seen in this sport. Like, a reminder, Pecco Bagnaia has 29 top flight victories and 2 world champions. He's Ducati's most successful ever rider in terms of sheer raw numbers.
This is his team. He helped build this bike. This was built for him to succeed with.
He
was annihilated.
He was cheek clapped in round 1, and he looked. He's like
at his track.
He couldn't hide the body language after the race. He looked like, I've seen pictures that the journalist snapped after the Grand Prix where he left through the back entrance. He didn't want anyone to see him leave the track. Like, this was a beaten man. Like, I don't care what you tell me. If you're coming out of the back door and you don't want to sign autographs with fans and you don't want the attention, that is the act of a man who wants to go home.
It's the kind of stuff we would jab at Sergio Perez for when Max would just blow his doors off every single weekend.
Yeah, it's Neil Hodgson was taking the piss off on the TNT broadcast, just saying, Marc Marquez, I won at 50%. I'm just like, he probably wasn't joking. That's the terrifying fact. It's just...
It's the kind of shit we used to watch in 2019 where he would just play with his food during the race because he had so much in hand. He'd finally pull Phillip Island 2019. He pulls the pin, drag races Vinales down the main straight, and then Vinales crashes trying to get back at him. There's just nothing he could do.
Yeah, that was Mark at 100% in 2019 if it had been on that final lap. And yeah, he bullied Maverick into a mistake. And again, we've said it before, Maverick is no slouch. Maverick has 10 top flight wins at the highest level. He's been a title contender in years past, and he's a really good bike rider. And yeah, this is what Mark can do. At his very best, Marc Marquez is untouchable. He is the nearest
This wasn't even close to his very best. It's terrifying.
Yeah, a part of me doesn't want to jump the gun so quickly on this, but it's hard not to when he was just so good this weekend. He looked virtually invulnerable. And he's got two, I'd argue, Marquez signature rounds coming up in the next 3 weeks with Argentina next weekend, which he's always gone very well around. Sometimes
too well.
Sometimes too well. In COTA, where he won 6 straight from 2013 to 2019.
Yeah, where we practically joke that COTA is a home race for Marc Marquez.
Yeah, what are we going to see when this guy goes to COTA on this thing?
A shellacking. They need to name the final corner after him. COTA. I've suggested it to the
name the whole
social
track.
media.
Name the whole track around him.
Like, he's already got one corner named after himself at Aragon. You might as well give him another at this point. Like,
I say, if what the Ducati engineers were talking about is true, like if this is what happened at a Bagnaia track, what is going to happen at a Marquez track?
Yeah, it's not a good sign when Davide Tardozzi is trying to pick Bagnaia up after the race, saying, third is fine, and Bagnaia is like, no, I'm third. That's the problem. Like, it's already seeming to me that Mark is starting to win round that garage, which is exactly what he did at Honda when Pedrosa was around when he first got there.
There's no greater way to do it than just going out and beating everyone's ass.
Yeah, that's one way of galvanizing a team in your favor, is just beat the other dude's ass.
Yeah.
And I mean, how many times did Bastianini straight up beat Bagnaia in the 2 years they were teammates? Not often.
It's not all that often. And it's like, Enea Bastianini is not a bad rider. He was very unlucky. He was genuinely unlucky through a lot of his Ducati tenure. He was hurt the first year of it. But there's
greatest rider on planet Earth for the last third of a race. More on him in a bit. But yeah, that's the story at the front. It's actually kind of concerning for the competitive balance of the sport because, well, we've just put by far the best rider on by far the best bike. And what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah, if you had hesitations that Ducati gave the wrong person the keys when they let Jorge Martin walk just to sign Marc Marquez, when the feeling is just like you don't know what you're going to get.
We do now.
You do know what you're getting.
The sad thing is that all the journos that I know, the people that I trust and respect, Simon Patterson, David Emmett, Matt Oxley, Neil Morrison, some of the very good dudes in this paddock that know what they're talking about, all said that this was going to happen with Mark, and I didn't want to believe them.
I tried to tell you.
I was like, I hold my hands up. I was wrong. I was so wrong. This is the best bike rider on earth. This might be the best bike rider we've ever seen. And if
this keeps up, get the ink out for the record books.
Yeah, if this form continues, it's going to be a very long season for everybody else involved. This is terrifying.
Yeah.
If there was one big surprise, which, we shouldn't be, given how much we talk about this man in terms of surprises over the course of the weekend, Ai Ogura.
The Ai Ogura Massive has arrived.
Ai Ogura
so fucking here for this.
Trackhouse's best ever weekend, I would argue, almost certainly. 5th in qualifying, 4th in the sprint, and 5th again in the Grand Prix. The best rookie performance we've seen in MotoGP on debut since, ironically, Marc Marquez back in 2013 when he podiumed his first race in Qatar by finishing 3rd. Where the hell did that come from?
Well, I also want to give you from occasional MotoMatters.com contributor Akira Nishimura, who pointed out the Japanese riders' performances in their first races in MotoGP/500cc since 2001. Toru Kawa retired. Shinya Nakano, 5th. Daiji Rikato, 10th. Makoto Tamada retired. Hiroshi Ayama, 10th. Taka Nakagami, 17th. Ai Ogura, 4th in the sprint, 5th in the Grand Prix. The best debut for a Japanese rider in the top class in 24 years. And Dre, in your race review, cross out surprise. It's now Ogura expectation.
Okay, I must admit I might have been exaggerating a little bit on that title, but I would never.
Use my line.
I would never have expected Ai Ogura to finish 5th on debut. Sensational. What a performance that was. I don't think, not even Davide Brivio, the man who hired him, and let's not forget, Brivio was under a lot of pressure to not hire that man. We spent a lot of 2024 debating whether Joe Roberts was going to be the American on an American bike and that they were going to go with the Homer pick. And there was an understandable, viable argument you could have made for Joe Roberts this time last year. He was in the middle of his best ever Moto2 season. He was top Calyx in the first half of the year. He was right up there. The marketing guys all chimed in and said, yeah, Joe Roberts should be a MotoGP rider. Ironically, a man who rejected Aprilia in years past had come full circle.
They're better
now. But Brivio stuck to his guns. He's always been a very good eye for talent, Davide Brivio. Yeah. He knows a good rider when he sees one. I was like, okay, you've done well to pinch Ai Ogura from out under Honda's nose, essentially. But I didn't, for the life of me. There was no, even in testing, it didn't look like Ogura had this kind of speed. Because I thought what we saw from Ogura, we were going to get from Bez. And that kind of happened, but not really.
Bez was all right.
Bez was good.
Yeah, Bez was
fine.
Bez was safe. That was a good weekend for Bez. But 5th on a Trackhouse?
Best Aprilia.
Best Aprilia on the day. Better than Frankie Morbidelli.
Shadowed Pecco Bagnaia all the way through the sprint.
Yeah.
Can't ask for much more than that.
Ogura said himself, he stuck behind Bagnaia because he wanted to watch him. He said, I wanted to learn how he was so smooth. So he said, look, I'm just taking notes back here while riding this Aprilia, trying to figure out how Bagnaia is doing this. What a performance. He just rode on instinct. Just put the thing down, pushed it, saw what he could do, and what it could do was P5 on merit. Sensational. Absolutely sensational performance.
Yeah.
And I must say, if that is what Ai Ogura can do on debut, that's promising for Jorge Martin for when he does inevitably return. Now, for those who didn't hear the news, he will not be back this next weekend at Argentina. He might miss Kota as well, depending on how fast he recovers from that broken scaphoid injury in his left arm. But I guess it's promising that Aprilia does have some pace here, Cam.
They do have some pace, but I would counter that with they were in race trim. Positions were good. It was a long, long road up to the podium, Ducatis. Especially if Mark had been able to open the taps rather than manage a tire.
True, but if you're
definitive second best manufacturer, like it's Ducati, Gap, Aprilia, Gap to everyone else.
Yeah, I mean it's a nice way of segueing into talking about the rest of the field, because I was going to ask Cam, it looks like we have some genuine convergence in this field with the fact that we had Hondas in the second group. We had
We're mid. We're mid. This is the win for us.
Congratulations, you finished your crash out.
Yes, Honda are now merely mediocre, which they would have taken to the bank last year. Jorge Martin was burned. Jorge Martin isn't here. Jorge Martin is not here. I'm too excited. Johan Mir tucked the front after burning himself on the bike, and you know what? He probably walks into that garage like, hey.
This is a man who low-sided and slid out from what was 7th at the time. Like, that is... I mean, Johann Zarco would actually end up finishing that race in said 7th place, which is the best Honda Grand Prix result in a couple of years. There's hope here. Like, Mir looked genuinely quick. They got 2 Hondas into Q2, and Zarco was P7 on merit. Like, Honda's found something.
Honda looked genuinely third best, which is, on raw pace. Like, not the only guy to burn himself on his bike as well. It was actually, for a lot of people, following was a big problem because it was so hot, which makes what Mark did all the more ridiculous up at the front of the pack. Because that was thought to, that's going to be the end of your race. Well, for him, it actually saved it.
Fabio Di Giannantonio had to stop in the sprint because the pain from the burns were too much. For those who don't know, Thailand was 37 degrees in the air during this race weekend. There was, again, shout out to my co-host on Tank Slapper, Zuriel Pudgemont, for mentioning this. He went to the medical department and the doctors were actually considering writing a proposal to Dorna to say, can we shorten the race? We were apparently this close to a shortened Grand Prix because there was concern that the temperature would cause burns and it'll be a genuine health and safety risk.
Burned rims on the Yamaha. Mir basically kept burning himself and was burning himself in the process of his low side. So
yeah, DG Antonio as well.
Minor mitigating factor, but yeah, Honda, actual middle of the pack and could fight. Still not great in a straight line. I think blunting the power delivery on their engine has ultimately been a very good thing.
Yamaha was a big disappointment. Jack Miller notwithstanding. Like, we shit on the Jack Miller signing as it happened, and it turns out he was the best part of the Yamaha fleet in the Grand Prix. 11th, which isn't saying much. Like, we were taking KTM to task, and at least they put 2 bikes in the top 10 in the Grand Prix.
KTM qualified like absolute garbage and then raced okay, which is weird. That's like the exact inverse of how KTM usually work. But yeah, both Bender and Bastianini put decent races together. Acosta crashed. Becoming all too common for him at the moment. Again, raw speed, he's the fastest KTM rider. I don't think that's in question anymore, but he's still too ragged on that thing.
Yeah, Acosta was running 6th when he low-sided it at turn 1 and crashed. Binder was 8th in the end. He was just 0.1 of a second ahead of Bastianini, who was 9th, who, again, Bestia found a surge of form late race like he always does and nearly became best KTM almost by sheer coincidence, by the way it turned out in the end. But it can't be great if Enea Bastianini, and this was a great stat that came up during the weekend, was 25 seconds slower in the sprint on a KTM than he was when he won the sprint on a Ducati just 4 months prior in Thailand. Not great.
It's a damning indictment of where KTM are as a manufacturer.
2 seconds a lap slower, Cam.
Yeah. The thing that we were raking Honda over the fucking coals for last year. Well, there you go. I don't know if convergence is the right word. More that, like, Ducati hasn't gotten any further ahead because, they're reusing most of last year's bike. It's basically minor aero bits and minor engine revisions on a GP24. But Honda has jumped up the field. KTM feels like have gone down the field. Other than Jack Miller, Yamaha were a big ball of garbage this weekend. And you could kind of expect that from this track, but even that, like, Fabio Quartararo was nowhere.
No,
only 15th in the Grand Prix, which is, again, not what you would expect to finish behind both Pramac riders who feel like they've been picked off the refuse pile.
Yeah, Pramac, a debut weekend for Yamaha, Pramac actually went pretty damn well this week. I don't think 11th speaks to how good Jack Miller actually looked out there. Ultimately, the same bugbear of using up his rear tire over the course of the race. But some things never change. But
his rear tire was shot by the end of that race. But like the raw speed of Jack Miller. I mean, Jack Miller qualified second row. The speed is there on the Yamaha. When's
the last time a Yamaha qualified that high?
He probably
early 22.
Probably early 22 was what I have to look back and I have to really look into that. But like there is some hope for Yamaha there. They've certainly got some raw speed. Speaking of tires, we got a bit of a bombshell on Wednesday out of nowhere. It was announced midweek that Michelin is done with MotoGP at the end of 2026. After yet more complaints about the tire situation, we've gone one further, and Dorna announced that Pirelli will be the new tire supplier for all four of MotoGP's classes, including Moto E, which they already supply for right now. But Pirelli will supply all four major categories in 2027 once the new regulations start. They asked Michelin, the press asked Michelin, well, why did you quit? And they said, well, one, we were outbid straight up by Pirelli.
They weren't willing to throw the money up.
And two, well, Dorna apparently told them, we want one tire supplier for all four of classes. And Michelin was like, there's nothing for us in Moto 2 and 3 to supply them with tires. So they go on.
Yeah.
A divorce of convenience in this scenario. Pirelli now supply all of Grand Prix motorcycle racing in addition to World Superbike.
Will that fix the problems with their products? I think that depends on what MotoGP asks them to make of their new tires.
I would think that they would make them like we have a testing problem in MotoGP, not a make the tires degrade problem, and that has ultimately been the biggest issue with Michelin, is that they can't get enough test time for the tire intended to take on all of this aerodynamic and ride height device nonsense.
Yeah. It's hard.
Dorna can't force them.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you got to get the teams to agree. There's so many political factors at play here. A part of me does feel bad for Michelin, where it wasn't their fault that the regulations changed to a point where all of a sudden they had to contend with an obscene amount of front downforce that their tires were not prepared to handle, because they had no idea that this was the direction the sport was going to go in, and they've had to play catch up to that ever since.
Yeah, it's the same problem that we saw in Formula One in 2020 when the cars, through just iteration every year, got so fast that the tires physically just can't handle it.
But if there's one thing Pirelli is good at, it's absorbing the blame for being the scapegoat for all the sport's problems. We've seen it in F1.
Yeah,
and we've seen it with Michelin and MotoGP, and there is a degree of truth to it, but it's not the whole truth. The biggest thing I would ask of Dorna and Pirelli is to, going into this new era, because they're going to be in for the new bikes in 27. So next year, we don't know what we're going to get, because if I were Michelin, the smart business decision is to can the new tires, which sucks for the racing product.
It's awful, but if you're Michelin, what for? You've got no skin in this game. In a year and a half's time, you're just going to be spending money to throw into a black hole. It's no longer your problem. It's no longer your priority.
No production relevance in it. Certainly, it's wasting money. I hope they don't make that decision, but I would be completely understanding if they did. But Dorna needs to give Pirelli the tools to succeed as a tire supplier, and that means testing. Test.
but they don't want to test because they don't want to give teams more information. That's the way they've been for years on this, and I agree. Like, they need to be able to let the manufacturers test more often so they can get this right. Because everybody, like, again, this MotoGP race, as much as Marquez won, was hardly a classic. It was perceived tension. But
it was tension out of context, because if you actually watch it and you understand it, you realize there was never a race at the front, and it was very difficult to follow, in part because of the heat, in part because of the aerodynamics, which then create dirty air to sit in a vacuum and suffer in the heat. And I don't think that is certainly not the last race we're going to see, which is very processional at best and formulaic at worst. They have to test. Like, for a new tire supplier, you don't have a choice. You need to give them the tools to succeed. Otherwise, you are running a very big risk.
I'm in full agreement with you on that. And the other angle I wanted to go at here is, you mentioned this earlier. So you're telling me that if everything goes to plan, Liberty Media will own Formula One and MotoGP, with World Superbikes under that umbrella as well, and they're going to have one tire supplier for all of those three series.
Yeah, Formula One and every step of the ladder, F2, F3, Academy, Superbike World Championship, Grand Prix motorcycle racing. Dre, if it walks like a monopoly, talks like a monopoly, and acts like a monopoly.
Why were people so surprised when the EU admitted they were going to do a Group 2 investigation of this purchase? I said this to people in our Discord server from day one, that there's no way this holds up. Because
they're going to have to sell something.
Not without intense scrutiny.
Because this is the thing. For those who don't know, Bernie Eccleston used to own MotoGP.
That's crazy.
Yeah, like, they used to own MotoGP, and he had to sell it in 2006 when he was buying Formula One's rights, because the European Competition Commission deemed that he was going to have a monopoly if he owned both series at the same time. If anything, the situation has become even more dominant in the motorsport landscape, where Formula One has an even bigger lion's share of the global motorsport coverage and audience, and MotoGP is arguably the second biggest motorsport series on Earth in terms of overall global fandom. So you're telling me Liberty Media is going to own 1 and 2 and have all pretty much grand dominance of bike racing as a whole, alongside the lion's share of the pie for motorsport on 4 wheels too? This is not going to hold up. Liberty's going to have to either cancel this deal, buy a minority stake in Dorna instead, or be forced to sell F1, because there is this is a monopoly. Call it what it is. Like, in the UK, we deem a monopoly here as 25% of the market. 25! Are you telling me that Formula One and MotoGP, in terms of global motorsport coverage, is less than a quarter of the whole pie? Bollocks. Not a chance.
Not in a month of Sundays.
But you're forgetting as well that these regulatory bodies are getting so much teeth taken out of them. Activision was bought by Microsoft for $75 billion US, and nobody batted an eye, because it's just like, oh my God, we get Call of Duty exclusive on Xbox. How cool is that?
Oh, to be fair, a lot of people did call that out, though, because they were like,
a lot of people called it out. They successfully did the purchase, and then it brought no more money into Xbox, and the shareholders went, guys, what the fuck?
Yeah, because
enough about our gaming podcast, because I could rant about that deal for an hour.
Yeah,
I just have no faith. I just have dropping faith that they. I think they'll let it through.
Yeah, well, because ultimately, like, you're expecting governments to do the right thing, and we are way, way, way after that era in the
but it's not even governments. It's the EU.
Well, yes,
the European Union doesn't play on shit like this.
We'll see.
Like, if I had faith in one body of idiots that would shut this down, it would be the EU, because they've literally done it before. And that was in 2000. And that was 2006, but they did stop Bernie from owning both series 20 years ago, which is something. So if there's one body that don't play, it's the competition commission.
Well, if there is one thing I hope for out of this, is that, if Dorna is forced to divest of, if Liberty is forced to divest of one or the other, likely MotoGP, can we at least get the old theme music back? Because I'm tired of this Def Rebel ass remix of the MotoGP theme that we threw in last year. It's garbage.
I think it's worse than that. Downgraded that. We downgraded the typeface for the in-race graphics hard.
The typeface is bad. Like, I don't hate the remixed theme, because let's be honest, Dorna remixed their own theme about 5 times last season for one-offs, like the throwback round.
I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the special one-off remix. I'm talking about the main one.
I know what you're talking about. Look, I don't hate the remix, but I get the complaints. It does feel a little bit flat, but it fits that the theme of MotoGP wants to be a bit more techno, I suppose, for 2025. But I don't like
the bikes certainly look it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the typeface. The typeface and the broadcasting graphics are just generally worse. I'm not a fan of them. The grouping, it's all a little bit sloppy.
It's all a little bit like we tried to crib like old Extreme G / Wipeout aesthetic, and you cheaped out on the typeface.
Yeah, it's not great. I was prepared to give it a chance, because I wanted to see what the full new typeface looked like on TV for real when they kind of half announced it at the end of last season. It isn't as good. It just isn't as good as what it was last year. It's harder to read. It doesn't. It feels like a rebrand for the sake of. I think Liberty had a word and were like, "Can you rebrand everything, please?"
I get that they wanted a unified style. I get that they want a unified graphic style, but this is not the way to do it.
Unified within its own graphics, RJ. Like, there's different typefaces for different part of the screen.
Which was the argument for changing everything up from what we had last year, that it wasn't unified. And now you've created the same problem, but it's all worse.
It's just, it needs improvement.
Yeah, it needs some work, certainly. MotoGP is back next week for the Grand Prix of Argentina at the Termas Rio del Hondo. Yes, the Butcher let this one go ahead this time. We actually are racing in Argentina again. That's cool. That we'll see if Pecco Bagnaia can mount a comeback, or whether the Marquez hype train continues for at least another Grand Prix. We'll have to wait and see. Next episode for us will be the IndyCar review of St. Petersburg, where, oh God, it's happened again. We got pulled over again.
Oh. Did it again.
This keeps happening.
Yeah, those two are in a contest to be more him.
It's a tricky contest, that's for damn sure. I've been Dre Harrison. They've been Cam Buckley and RJ O'Connell. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time. Sayonara.
Later, y'all. And above all else, just think about the bikes.
I need to see a body.